You're listening to Zeitgeist Movement Global Radio, and this is part 2 of the U.S. Coordinator panel discussion on how adopting the Zeitgeist Movement value set affects present-day living. So, examples of creative ways to repurpose, reuse, and recycle goods. And I already kind of talked about this a little bit, but anyone else have anything that comes to mind you want to add?
Books. That's what comes to mind. I've purchased more used books, I think, than anything else, and I just think of the amount of multiplicity in the world that it's just a great way to reuse and educate without having to always run down to Barnes and Nobles and buy a new copy of everything, something. I hope no one from Barnes and Nobles.
There's also the library too, but I'm a big used books fan because I like to highlight and mark up my books for the most part. That's why. And I buy a lot of nonfiction books to do that in. Eva's next. Go ahead.
Jen, I just wanted to add to what you had commented, and I actually got a chance to I guess learn about some new sites to check out. But I've always had a mindset that things have a lifespan in their usefulness. And in the days that I worked in the technology field, we went through quite a bit of materials and a lot of components were broken down. And I've discovered quickly that when you hold on to something, even in a 6-month span, it becomes less and less useful, i.e., valued and needed. And it basically became garbage. So one of the things I keep in mind is the lifespan of something is to use it if I'm not using something, is to move it along and to really get over the attachments of whatever that thing may be. So yes, giving things away, absolutely. I apparently had started because I moved things along so much, having roommates at one point and a 2-car garage, that people even at work were giving me things. And it wasn't much to sort things out, things that were usable, and move them along and or donate them. And I even had people that were in the area that worked nearby that needed things. And it was great to hear some of the stories of things that got passed along and that were actually being used. So I also can, I guess, break things down, not literally physically, but sometimes that it involves breaking things down to reuse them in different ways, whether it be articles of clothing or furniture and whatnot. And I understand that's a hands-on type of event, and I do have that part of me that enjoys that, the mental understanding something, breaking something down, and then repurposing and putting it back together and getting it back out the door and so on and so forth. Sometimes a lot of things really just need to be cleaned. That's really all they need to do. Be cleaned, maybe a little bit of repair and patching. And so I think there's a lot. And again, it comes down to your time and money. But it's something that puts value back into the things, puts life back into the things, and moves it to where it needs to go versus into a landfill.
Thanks for that. Also, yeah, it was a good point about technology that sometimes people may think, I want to hang on to this because I feel guilty throwing it away. But then there's that other value that comes up. This is where you have the conflicting values of the value of utility and efficiency and use of space. So that's where you're making a judgment call of which in that moment is more valuable to you. If its utility isn't as valuable anymore and you're needing to upgrade, then that's where you go with that decision, and you're just maybe careful about how you move that along. Maybe to a place that's going to break it down and have all the components be broken down where they need to go. I know Goodwill, I think, does that too, but it's great if you can do it and if you have the abilities to break things down on your own. Other things I thought of are that I use a lot of scrap paper, printing on the back of papers that have already been printed on if I'm just using it for myself, nothing official. I also use envelopes, including junk mail envelopes, as notepads. And I reuse folders from an office standpoint. If you have a home office, or even when I've worked in offices, what I can do is with the file folders, you can flip them inside out and reuse them easily if you need to. So just those kinds of things where in a fleeting moment you might say, oh, I'm going to toss these and just get a new set. You can save some money and actually just do some minor changes and reuse something, and it's still as good as if you had purchased something new. The use is still there. Those are some things I thought of.
If you want to get really specific too, if you just use napkins and paper towels a lot too, I mean, maybe it's just because I'm Asian and it's something that we do in our household, but if there's like a half-soiled paper towel, we'll kind of keep it around in case there's spills or like floor stuff that we got to just clean up, and we'll just use it that second time. But, I mean, just to add on.
Going to move on to the next prompt. Examples of ways to volunteer in your community and develop cooperative relationships. So these are kind of getting into what might be patchwork projects. I know that even in Zeitgeist Movement events, we have incorporated donations to food pantries, and that's been a way we've given back to the community with the influx of people coming to an event, having them bring a good to donate, and we've had success with that. What are some things that you do personally or that you're aware of that are good to suggest here?
Well, I got one little thing that I do, since we're talking about such specific examples. We have a recycling program out here that's not very good, and you can recycle some things, and I can recycle cardboard stuff, but I've actually found a shipping guy who is right across the way from where I work, and shipping center, and he packages stuff for people and ships them. And what I'll often do is I'll load my car up with a lot of the cardboard boxes that I get from stuff that I purchase and take them off there and drop them off with him, and he can reuse them before they go to the recycling center.
Oh, that's great. So you already have an established relationship with somebody who can take the things you're not using. Perfect. Eva, you have something to add?
Yeah, ways to volunteer and develop cooperative relationships. One of the things I took on recently is I'm a shop steward for a union, and you want to step into one of the most non-cooperative corporate environment and try to, as a volunteer. It was such a juxtaposition from working in the movement, granted, albeit all both being volunteer, but I mention it because it builds community. It's essential that there be some type of interim, at least, and I'm discussing about between union and non-union, in the workplace. What the communication has always been has been a breakdown in communication where information simply isn't flowing. There isn't an understanding of how to interpret what's written, and the breakdown and even in interpretations, and understanding that quite often people are saying this, trying to say the same thing, but saying it in different ways, and very confusing and very positional and very argumentative. So it is a volunteer position. I was told that I must come from the heart to do such a thing. I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but things are changing if nonetheless individuals are having an opportunity to be heard. It reduces the stress in the environment. It allows people to feel that they have a conduit, and it also allows an understanding to permeate of the direction that all of us are going in. It becomes less positional. Everyone's striving to maintain their jobs, granted some more than others in regards of ego and so on and so forth, but I found it to be extremely challenging, and I can't say it's the most rewarding thing I've done. I still think the volunteer work with the movement is the most rewarding, but maybe perhaps this is a day-by-day, everyday volunteer project that I'm involved with versus with the movement. So I strongly suggest if people aren't already volunteering their time in the movement, and to whatever degree, if you want to not challenge, but you want to take on what you've learned in the movement, take it out to the real world, and see the value set change within yourself, and see how your communications are skills are with other. And that's probably the best way to do is to volunteer on something on the outside of the movement as well.
Thanks, Raul.
I just had two things that I wanted to mention. It's winter time now, and in the area where I am, we have a couple different shelters. Now, if you really talk to the executive directors and the people running these, a lot of these organizations are literally a culmination of churches coming together, and every day, this church will house them this one day. The next day it'll be another church. The next day it'll be another church. This is literally like a day-by-day. People will be out in the cold. I mean, any kind of things like these are super helpful. And while you're in there, just opening the dialogue with everyone. I happen to be, I do like nonprofit auditing, and I was able to just, I work with the executive directors and some of the people on the boards of these, and I asked her if she heard about the Zeitgeist Movement and mentioned what it was about. They just are so busy, but they're very open to the ideas of the movement. So yeah, just get out there and I guess volunteer what you can. The second thing I want to mention is, so I work in the city of Charlottesville. I live 30 minutes away, a little more rural area called Afton. Out where I live, there's people that I know who are setting up biodiesel vehicles, which is where you basically take a diesel engine and convert it so that you can basically take the vegetable oils and the used oils that restaurants use to fuel your car. This is just another thing. It's like, my friend was basically asking me how, what's the best way to get this thing started, and I suggested to him just a sort of an information gathering that's done weekly, bi-weekly, whatever it may be, where you're just getting information out there, where maybe one person every time will host an info session and just teach and get the info out there, and building basically a network of people. But again, while you're out there, these are always going to be just patchwork things, and I think it's important to get the greater dialogue out that there has to be a bigger solution to all of this. So if you're getting involved in any of these little side projects, sustainability projects, people trying to, food banks, shelters, all kinds of different areas like this, bring that dialogue in. People are they just haven't heard this stuff, and they are so ready to hear it. I guess do what you can where you are, and just talk about it, and you'll be surprised. You'll be surprised how receptive people are.
Thanks. Brandon?
Well, right on. That's definitely how I see it too. People are really hungry for this stuff, and just taking this information into other circles, and just also what Eva said as far as volunteering on an everyday basic level, not even so much as just getting involved in other organizations, so much as just taking it to society on an everyday level wherever you are, being kind, having a positive influence on other people, getting to know people, interacting, engaging other people. What do you really have to lose? I mean, it's so much. It aligns you with the values of the movement and what we're talking about. It aligns you with just the positive influence that we're making. It's interesting to interact with people. You have a positive effect on them, and it's just better all the way around. So yeah, that's kind of what I would say. And then also I wanted to read the definition of volunteer real quick from dictionary.com. A person who voluntarily offers himself or herself for a service or undertaking. Second one is a person who performs a service willingly and without pay. And that's kind of what I'm trying to say here, which is going above and beyond and just basic everyday situations. There's really nothing to lose, and again, it aligns you with everything that we're talking about, and just kind of takes you in that positive direction. Also, wanted to read this one little part from the orientation guide the new orientation guide that came out for the movement. There's a little part in there about volunteerism where it says, in the words of Margaret Mead, if you look closely, you will see that almost anything that really matters to us, anything that embodies our deepest commitment to the way human life should be lived and cared for, depends on some form of volunteerism. All organizations and volunteer groups aside, we're all volunteering. This whole system is based on some kind of volunteerism in general. I think that's kind of the point there. So yeah.
Thank you. And another key thing is in your definition of volunteer, it said willing. And that's the key, is that it's something you're choosing to do on purpose. It's meaningful to you. And it's not something that's mandated. So that's the difference. Sometimes when we talk about the Zeitgeist Movement and a resource-based economy, people think they're going to be forced to contribute in some way or forced to volunteer without pay and just get rations. Like, they have all these wild ideas about what we're really talking about. There is such an importance to having a sense of freedom and choosing what you put your labor towards, so that the kind of work you're doing isn't stressful or taxing on you in any way, unless it's something you've chosen for yourself because you get incredible enrichment and joy from doing it. It's a part of the human health factor again. And you can get that from volunteering, even within a monetary system. And sometimes that in and of itself, people are so grateful because it is different. When you are giving without an exchange, people are so grateful for that when they're in need. I know when I've done volunteer work in the past, I've done delivering meals in person to families, especially during Thanksgiving, things like that. Just the reaction is overwhelming. But really, I mean, people should be doing that all the time. I mean, thinking about others, not in any major way, not in any way that would be a sacrifice to yourself or cut into your own well-being, but something that would be just a gesture that you could put forward when you have excess or something to offer, and thinking of ways to do that. I have a book here that I got my hands on that's called How to Be an Everyday Philanthropist, and it's by Nicole Bouchard-Bowles, and it's 330 ways to make a difference in your home, community, and world at no cost. And I wanted to share a few things in here that are specifically science-oriented that people in the Zeitgeist movement might be interested to know about. Actually, Bo Inc. is in here. That's one I wanted to mention, where people are using their idle computers for scientific research. And that's at boinc.berkeley.edu. And the Zeitgeist movement has a lot of people signed up for that. We have a whole team of people allowing their idle computer energy processors to be used for helping to compute, helping scientists to cure diseases, study global warming, and discover pulsars are things that are going on. Another version of that, which I haven't checked out yet, is it lists as worldcommunitygrid.org. Is supposed to be similar to Bo Inc. Another thing that struck me that we don't even think about is things that you naturally have, like bio stuff that you could donate. I know I've heard of people being able to donate their cut hair for wigs for people who are going through chemo or have lost their hair, things like that. And you could arrange that with hairdressers. But something I didn't know was one where pregnant women can donate the umbilical cord to be used in stem cell research. So you could donate something that would be helpful in treating diseases such as leukemia, cancer, and blood disorders. And you can find out information about that at marrow.org or parentsguide.coordblood.org. Also, let's see, what else? So there was another one I want to mention really quick that seems really cool. I just recently learned of this. But if we have anybody who is scientifically oriented, if that's what you study, there's a website called oncallscientists.aas, as in Sam.org. And that is where scientists can sign up and put their skill set in to donate their time to nonprofits and good causes for research to just better humanity. Anything relating to giving of your scientific knowledge and perhaps helping someone do research. Maybe they have labs or equipment or just knowledge in a particular area that they can loan. And I thought that was really cool. And I think these are things that might be interesting to pass along within our chapters. People who are wanting to connect in a specific area of their expertise. And I know we're really big into the scientific method in the movement. And that leads me into the next prompt, which is examples of ways to share the importance of the scientific method and or systems theory approach with others. So what do you got? Go ahead, Brandon.
Okay, yeah, so science. First of all, I think it's good to note that science has got this bad rap because of its inherent adaptive nature. You know, it's always evolving. We're always, you know, our science and our awareness and our technology, our interaction with the natural world is always evolving. So it's kind of got this bad rap. It's uncomfortable for people. It's, you know, it brings new awarenesses. It challenges beliefs and traditions. Scientific research isn't always so much fun. It doesn't give immediate return. Scientific reasoning, thinking involves considering things. It involves actually thinking, inquiring. It's not always the most popular thing. So I think it's definitely got a bad rap. And also because of the word science, I think people have more of an issue with the word itself and what they associate it with, and how they've been, you know, groomed to think of the word and what it means. It's so often not what it means. And I really want to describe what science is at the most basic of levels. It's really almost everything around us is a process of science. It's an evolutionary process, a thing of adaptation, or quote, making it, you know, the best you can in the natural environment. We all use science all the time. It's just a matter of living. It's such a basic, fundamental part of living. We're always doing it. We're always taking in information, having experiences, taking in experiences, processing it, reflecting on it, learning from it, and then doing things differently next time, all with the purpose of living better. What does living better mean? It just means getting your needs met, of course, and also having less uncertainty and haphazardness in everyday life. It's really just a matter of getting better at life. So science I once heard it described as mastering the natural world, you know, a way of mastering the natural world. But examples of science, if you're describing it to somebody, it's really such a fundamental thing. Again, it's, for example, let's say it's late, it's in the middle of the night, you're walking through the dark in your apartment, and you're finding your way around the apartment that you've walked so many times in the light of day, but you know your way because you're familiar with it. You've taken in information, you've used a process of gaining feedback, and now you know how to walk and do something. It's so subconscious. Also, like driving on freeways. Here in Los Angeles, we get stuck in traffic a fair amount of times. So, you know, you get stuck on a freeway more times than you want to. You're going to start taking different routes and noticing the time of day and the times of year, and you're going to start to adapt, you know, and get better at taking different routes. You don't have to sit in traffic. Again, lessening the uncertainty of your everyday life. When you cook food, you know, you get better at cooking it, you don't burn it as much. You're always getting better at things, and a lot of us in the movement will describe science as, you know, what works, what works and what does not work. So that's kind of my wrap on the science angle.
Great. Jason, go ahead.
I wanted to just start off reading a quote from Dr. Robert Sapolsky in his book, The Trouble with Testosterone, which is a quote on science. He says, you know, I love science, and it pains me to think that so many are terrified of the subject, or feel that choosing science means that you cannot also choose compassion or the arts or be awed by nature. Science is not meant to cure us of our mystery, but to reinvent and reinvigorate it. And I really like that quote because it puts it into perspective that, you know, there's a stigma that it's cold. Science is cold and sterile, and there's no art in it, and there's no compassion, and there's no humanness. It's just this, everything's dictated by logic and machines. And it's not true at all. And like, to reference what Brandon had just said, science, the process of science is all around us in everything we do today. Everything from all of the resources that we have, all of the tools that we use, and the cell phones that we make our phone calls on, and the computers that we're using to listen to this radio address right now. And it's all around us, and we take it for granted, and that it allows us to see the world and bring us closer together, and experience more literature and art than we could ever probably experience on our own without it. And as far as sharing this train of thought in expressing science to people, if anyone's interested who's listening, there is a great short guide that I've always referenced. It's called A Field Guide to Critical Thinking, and it's something that was written in 1990 by a college professor I believe in Florida, and his name is James Lett. If you go into Google and you just type in A Field Guide to Critical Thinking, it pops up as probably the first 10 web hits. And it explains nicely how, in today's world, there are so many reasons for the popularity. This is its opening sentence, actually. There are so many reasons for the popularity of paranormal beliefs. And he kind of lists them in his article. And he goes down to give a quick synopsis and a breakdown of what critical thinking it is and how to use it as a tool in the world. And one of the things that jumps out at me the most is falsifiability, and people who hold on to things and believe things that are not testable, they're not falsifiable. So a great way to do that is to doing anything you can to put out media that shows the connection that science allows us to have to the world around us. Gets people to take on the perspective that it is important, and it is enhancing human well-being, and it's not sterile, and it's not what Hollywood makes it out to be, with the Terminator and things like that, where it's technology is, or basically implying science is holding human destruction in the long run. It's not that we can't blow ourselves up, but blowing ourselves up is a conflict of social value and technological capability. It's not technology that blows us up. It's 1,000-year-old thinking with, modern day science is a combustible mixture. I think that's a quote from Carl Sagan, or a paraphrase from something he had written.
Yeah, one of the things I like about the system theory is, in my breaking it down to the simplest components of having a goal, having a process, and having the elements that execute the process to get you to the goal. And in so much that quite often when there's conflict amongst people is because one of those things are out of alignment. And so it's really efficient for me in conversation with people when they're struggling, whether it's with each other or their issues or whatever, to really identify these things. Well, this is the process, and maybe this is what needs to be, or these are the elements, these are the individuals or the components that are being looked at, and okay, what again is the goal? Okay, we all know what the goal is. And I'm sure one of these days I'll be able to actually just say, okay, let's just look at this from a systems theory standpoint, and let's get this on point. So I tend to function day-to-day wise in practice because it's what works, and then label it later for convenience and communication. It's just a science, the scientific method, the system theory, these are things that I now have labels for the things that we do. And it's what really makes things operational. It's what makes things efficient, and especially when you can communicate it. It's great to have it running through your head, but when you're working towards the concept of a society moving together, it's great to have this language. And really, if it offends someone to have a label on it, then fine, you tell me what you want to call it, we'll call it that, and we'll move in that direction. But I find the systems theory approach, and I know it's far more complicated, but broken down, I think, distilled to its fundamental pieces, it's very operational.
Great, thanks. I like that it's what works. It's the way we find out what works best. Gary's up next.
As I thought about this is a topic that I've kind of thought about in a much broader way, I think, than even some people within the Zeitgeist Movement do. Ever since I became involved, and I wrote a little section here that I'd like to read. Institutional science has much in common with institutional religion or institutional economics. They are all embedded within a system where vested interests are often the determinants of their processes and conclusions. True science, like true religion and true economics, are all founded on an approach that mirrors the scientific method, meaning that they are based on direct observations of the natural world. Therefore, any theories derived from these processes, though they may be flawed because incomplete, are always at the very least based on observed facts. Institutional science, for instance, will, for many reasons, often disregard anomalous facts that do not fit present theories. Take, for instance, the secret life of plants. This was a scientifically reproducible experiment with very profound implications about the interdependence of all life in some manner that is not generally recognized by institutional science. This study, in spite of its profound implications, has largely been ignored by mainstream institutional science. And I think that same thought process that we talk about, that we label as the scientific method, is a method that can be applied to just about everything that we experience in life. Consciousness itself and the way we perceive the world is our instrument. That we use our body as our instrument for contacting any observations we make with the world. And if we take a scientific method type approach to the way we process the information that we receive at any level, whether it's through scientific study and scientific instruments, or whether it's through our own contact with the world in general, and our observations of ourself and then our own nature of consciousness, I think it leads to repeatable and valid insights.
It is important to make a distinction between the scientific method and science as an institution. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because I think a lot of people have a misconception about the Zeitgeist Movement. They are very turned off to science because it's been corrupted as an industry. And when they think about, having the whole world go to that, they think, well, that would be corrupt. Or they think only the scientists and technicians would be running everything, and that would just be a different elite corrupt group. But that's where we get into why removing the market system makes the information more pure. When you remove the reward to corrupt data, and the reward you get from doing science is having accurate data, that's the only reward. I wonder how much accurate data we could possibly uncover, or how many things that are really confusing right now in a monetary system would suddenly become more clear, because there wouldn't be any advantage for someone, a pharmaceutical company or anyone else, to spend things a certain way or to look at variables a certain way. Now, there would always be biases we'd be working with, because everyone has a bias that they're working with. But it would be socially acceptable to challenge that, so that we could come to the determination of, we really want to know. That's part of what we're advocating, is that if someone comes to you with updated information, even if you don't like it, that the greater value of having real information would trump you feeling good about the information you're getting. And, I think we all from an ego standpoint have, well, I'll speak for myself. I have a challenge when sometimes I'm hit with something where I realize, I've been wrong about this. And I don't like that. But I have to ultimately say, well, what's the greater good? Do I want to be continually wrong about it, but, feel good that I am sticking with my story? Or do I want to always have the most updated view to work with? When I think about science, I think of it as this, and I mean the method, is something that is expanding our collective understanding of our shared reality. And we can only do that when it's not corrupted. And I wanted to add to the studies that you're talking about with plants. I've heard of those, actually, and Jacques Fresco's addressed some talk of those. And one thing that I consider is that we know from those studies that there is a reaction of plants, that is, feedback can be measured. There's a meaning, I think, that is put on the study that suggests that it's pain that they're experiencing. I don't know that that part has been proven, that that's actually how it is interpreted. We know that it's registered as feedback. We don't know that it is interpreted. I mean, I think there's still more to be discovered there. And I know that there's some people that have drawn very specific conclusions around it. But I do think it's something that we will learn more about as we are able to measure more.
I think that the main conclusion that was drawn from the experiment in its original state was by the fellow who actually did the original experiments, was that what the experiments demonstrated to him was that there was a connection and a very intimate interdependence between human beings and plants and other life, other animals and plants, that was not yet recognized by science, and that we have an influence on one another in one shape, in one form or another. There's some kind of informational exchange between us that's not recognized by any standard scientific understanding at the time, as of now. And there's a lot of research, a follow-up research that went on that, and some of it was done in Russia because they got involved in a lot of this wacky, quote, wacky kind of stuff that was done. And I saw one really interesting thing about that, and that when it came to thinking about automated farms and automated systems, like we talk about a lot in the movement of the tower hydroponic farms and stuff like that, the Russians developed systems where they actually had biofeedback mechanisms attached to the plants in traditional greenhouses that actually regulated when the plants would feed themselves, when they would water themselves, when they would change the temperatures in the greenhouses, and so on. So they were actually totally automated greenhouses, but the automation was handled by the plants themselves.
Yeah, it's very cool stuff. I think the challenge with science because I definitely know that there are the stipulations with energy and the interplay of energy between beings, and that's interpreted one way by people in a spiritual crowd and others, and even within scientists there's division on the meaning. But ultimately, because the scientific method needs to have a way to measure, it's always going to be behind the idea, because first we have to have a hypothesis, and the hypothesis comes from the people who are having these thoughts about, well, what if, well, what if, well, what if? How do you explain this and how do you explain that? And that's the start of the scientific process. I think what's beautiful about that is that eventually science catches up to actually have a way to provide more information about what we can already see is something more is there. And we just need more information about it. And science can't say anything about it until there's measurable data that can really make that connection. So I do think there will be there will always be sort of a gap between what some people know intuitively and science actually coming and backing it up. I don't think it means they're automatically right with their intuitions, but things that have been intuited, because we have some observable data, we just don't know how, and there's a theory of how that seems like it would make logical sense. When it gives us a direction to explore when we have the ways to measure. I also wanted to add something along this line of thinking with the ways to share the importance of the scientific method, or I'm going to add in a little bit of critical thinking in general. One of the things that I've had to check myself on, and definitely more so since I've been involved in the movement, is taking in information and reading articles about studies. And one of the key things is a lot of times there is a common flaw that something is communicated as a causation when the only thing that's actually proven is a correlation. I was trying to think of an example to give. I had somebody who they had posted something on Facebook or somewhere where they were worried about an article that was talking about a new study had shown that people who have a sedentary lifestyle are more likely to die sooner. And the way that it was interpreted made it sound like, oh, this is a definite thing. And when I looked at it, I kind of eased his nerves a little bit. And I said, well, let's consider that this is presented as causation, but all that you can have, because there's so many variables, is that there may be a correlation. When you think about it, people who are sickly also are sedentary. So then that was not addressed. But I went to find a reference for it, and I found something really humorous that I want to share. So I found an article that's written on this study, and it's from 2011 in the Daily Mail. It was published June 25th, 2011. The title is, "Sitting Down Raises Death Risk by as much as 40% and is not countered by exercise." In other words, even if you exercise, if you sit down a lot, you're more likely to die, actually, is what it says. And in fact, I'm going to read you word for word what this are. Now, again, this isn't the actual scientific study. This is the study being communicated by someone who wrote this article. The author is Mark Duell. And the second, I'll read you. If you're reading this sitting down, then stand up, it could save your life. Women who sit more than 6 hours daily are 40% more likely to die than those sitting for less than 3 hours a day, a study said. Now, just pause for a moment and think about that. The hilarious comments ensued about how people can achieve immortality from standing up. that this actually says you're more likely to die, as if there's an option for not dying. I like one of the comments that was somebody made. Let me see if I can find it. Women who he reads that second line and he says, surely the statistical probability of dying is 100% in actuality. So this is the kind of stuff that gets published that people are reading as science. But just going through these things, developing a critical eye, and you can do so humorously, brings people's attention to, we need to check what we read. We need to check the data before repeating it, before circulating it. I had an instance where I circulated something that had tons of backlinks of support, and one person called me out because they were able to find a retraction in an obscure journal from that same place that published the original findings, and it was having to do with pH balance being a possible contributor to cancer if you were too acidic. And there's so much on the internet you'll find is based on an old study, but then it was retracted by a newer study, but that has like one link that you can hardly find anywhere. And so this person was really excited to, you're circulating false information, but I had to check myself, but it's everywhere. But okay, so I'll take that as a note that even quantity of information is not something to go by, because there could be 1,000 articles based on misinformation and one piece that has retracted it. And yeah, we don't have time to debunk them all, but I think part of the culture of adopting the value of the scientific method is that when somebody does call you out and you have that moment where you're like, crap, I thought I was circulating something valid, that you're instead able to say, thank you. And I think how many people can do that in their business or throughout their day when somebody says, this thing you've been saying is actually not true. How often would you get a thank you in return? And that's part of what we want to cultivate, is for people to be okay with being proven wrong if it's necessary, if it comes down to it, if there's contrary information. And at the very least, if you're not willing to give the point, or it doesn't seem like that other study is as conclusive, you can just say, oh, wow, well, there's more work to be done. And that way you can back off a little bit on your certainty of that one particular area that you had before and just say, you know, this may be disproven, and at least talk in terms, you know, I start to use language that's different as far as levels of certainty, probable cause or possible cause, to leave room for exploration in that area. So that's how it affects me in my daily life and things that I see. I can still think about, well, you know, can we evaluate science and really look at the wording on this? What is this really saying? And a lot of times these journalists are picking up a study and they're putting their own spin on it. And one of the most common spins, like I said, is that they're going to say something is a causation that's really just a correlation. There are really too many variables that are still up in the air, and you can't say, this element causes cancer. We always hear it, like, how many different things cause cancer? Well, we know that people have cancer and this, like, there's a correlation. We can say we have found a relationship, but because there's so many other variables involved, that's where it gets complicated. So things are much more likely to be a correlation than causation. Causation has to be really definitive. And that's something that I learned. Moving on, examples of ways to share the importance of automation and use of technology for greater efficiency. Gary, go ahead.
Well, I'd like to just sort of start this off with a little comment about technology. I think I know a lot of people in the Zeitgeist Movement focus heavily on the technological aspects of the solutions that are possible, and I think that's really important. However, I think it's also important to understand very clearly that technology presents as many problems as it offers in a lot of ways, and that the real key to cultural value shift is what will determine the manner in which technology is applied.
To me, I think of technology as a tool, and it used for a specific purpose. When we're talking about it for the Zeitgeist Movement, it's for social concern, for the betterment, for balance. If we're using a systems theory approach, hopefully that also means other things have been taken into account, environment, other animal life, etc. Brandon, you have something to add?
Everything is really a form of technology. Everything from a coffee cup to a toothbrush to even fingernails, even the human body, it's all kind of got its own technology going on. Everything. Some people in the movement I'll hear people say, you know, anything with a function or utility to it is some form of technology. And when you think about it, that really encompasses just about every single thing in existence has some kind of utility or function to it. So I really see no difference when it comes to technology regarding I don't know, let's say you're crossing a river and you use a stepping stone to get across, and you reach for a branch to help you get across. Those automatically become tools, your tools, your technology in that respect. At that time, I see no difference from a stepping stone to get across a river than automation technology to automate food production or transportation. A lot of the advanced methods that we see are emerging today. I see no difference from it. A lot of people will come up with they'll have kind of this fear automatic response to technology. It's really popular today, of course. I'm sure we're all familiar with it, where people will kind of say, well, we've lost our way and we need to get back to our roots and getting back in touch with the earth, and technology is not the answer yet. While I get what they're saying, of course, at the same time, technology has really brought us closer together with certain social media elements. It brings people together in a certain way. It keeps us distant in some other respects, but also things like automobiles and other transportation has enabled us to get in touch with nature like never before. I mean, take the invention of a car or an automobile. Now gives people the opportunity to drive out to a place in nature where they would never have been able to walk that far or get there. Not with the kind of convenience and accessibility is the technology allowed. So in a lot of ways, like Gary was saying, it just really depends on how it's applied. But as far as technology, I see no difference from it. And if people ever say like, oh, they're not really into technology, I always love thinking of always say it, but I always just love thinking, well, if you don't like, if you're against technology and you just don't think that's the way at all, then it's basically, first of all, it's basically impossible not to. But just go out and stand in the woods with no clothing, because that's a form of technology, and just basically stand there and just don't do anything, and you'll succeed at that. So that's kind of my bit on technology.
Eva, go ahead.
Yeah, technology is interesting as a method for efficiency, and I know more recently we look at technology as the things we have in our house and around us, and yes, they can be all very nice when they're working well, but we also can be very prone to not trusting them when they don't. Your internet goes down, your electricity goes off, the latest gadget you're watching, whatever, it shuts down, and it can all be very frustrating. And I remember in talking about the movement and some of the direction and goals with a relative that's a physicist, and the concern of the efficiency of the technology. But then the question I pose is, do you really think we're really getting the best of what technology has to offer right now? And of course, that's kind of when the conversation ended, not out of distaste, but basically out of thought. Are we really getting the best? Well, no, we're not. So technology will be the thing in its correct application and efficiency that'll allow us the automation. Now, an example of automation is, okay, I could at my last position literally sit down and write and design in a very short time, 6 months, something that would absolutely make my job obsolete. Now, and this is what I proposed, if I do this, will you still pay me? Because I've automated, so the job's getting done, but of course we still need our survival mechanisms, so how can we strike a deal? So automation will replace a lot of this type of work that I'm talking about. And it's not that far reaching for people to look at their own positions. And again, the value shift, looking at things differently. Do I really want to hoard a bunch of stuff on my desk or in my area to make it look like I'm doing something so I have value, or do I want to work efficiently and cooperatively and free myself up so that I can have thinking time and actually have creative thought? I understand it can be difficult to have those expressions in any one place, so don't try to get it always in one place, whether it's your personal life or or at work, or a mix of the two, family, friends, that these types of conversations are had, that it's the direction that we will need to go in order to solve the problems that we have created.
Thanks, Jason.
So the importance of automation and the use of technology for greater efficiency, well, I think it's been covered pretty well already by what everyone's already said, but to just take on, to understand how technical efficiency is better for everyone. It's an outcome from optimizing society in a technical sense. With the maximizing of conservation, peak preservation, or strategic preservation, being strategic in the conservation and the use, trying to take into account dynamic equilibrium with the world around us, with our physical environment as best as we can. It's the the example that I've given before is like, if you cut down the trees faster than they regrow, then you are out of dynamic equilibrium. You're stripping that resource, and it's possible to strip a resource entirely, and basically you run into all sorts of problems when you go past the carrying capacity of the physical environment. So technical efficiency in our daily life is one thing, but seeing it as a method to social operation by optimizing, let's say, transport, production. When you have basically a problem with this in the world today is that it's anti-economic. Being technically efficient does not enhance the economy in the sense that it displaces labor. Automation displaces people, displaces purchasing power. It's anti-economic. GDP goes down when you do that, even though it's cheaper for someone to automate than to pay people. Maximizing what it means to be technically efficient is getting as close as we can to what's sustainable in the sense of what as put forth by dynamic equilibrium, by what the physical world around us, the carrying capacity of our environment, can sustain. And that can be changed. The carrying capacity can be changed by how we apply ourselves scientifically. So with the combination of innovation, technology, and a sustainable value system, you can increase the carrying capacity, which means you can increase what is available to everyone, meeting more people's needs. This gets limited inside of the economic scenario where, again, being efficient means products last. They don't break down. You're consuming less. Consuming less is anti-economic. It doesn't support the growth paradigm. So I think just being able to see this in application in the world around you, where you can see the resources being wasted, you can see the pollution outputs affecting everyone, you can see the cancer rates increasing. By basically pointing this out and seeing how we would benefit from technical efficiency, I think would go a long way in people reorienting their thinking, their mindset, and be open to what would it mean to have live inside of a system that is oriented in this fashion, and how it actually is a benefit rather than I would think more than anything right now people would just think it's more impossible just because we're in the system that we're in now, rather than it being not attained. It's attainable technically. I think a lot of people would probably agree with that, but they would see the institutions, the established way things are, as being more of a barrier than anything else.
One thing I want to add is I think the technology conversation really can get us back to the value set, because technology being a tool is that it's what is that tool designed for? And when we talk about technology, it is in a very specific context, going back to that health and well-being and sustainability and that balance, or a systems theory approach taken into account, and efficiency and conservation of resources to the best benefit of everyone, and also the environment. So with that in mind, it would be continually updated, and we'd be improving upon it. And one thing that I hope we will improve is our orientation to technology, even through language. One of the things that I've noted before in conversations is that we have some built-in blocks to technology that are built in even to our own linguistics, at least in the English language. We have a sort of romanticized view of things that are authentic and natural and real. And I get that. I value that too. And then what we have is the word man-made. And to many people, the word man-made equates to artificial. And artificial is put up against the natural, and we think, oh, which would you rather have? Would you want something natural, or would you want something man-made? But what I like to bring to people's just food for thought is that when a bee makes something, we don't call it bee-made. When other animals do something, we just call it natural. But when men do something, or women, people, humans, do something, we have a special designation for it that has an association with artificial. But I like to re-include us with nature, that we're a part of nature, that we are evolving, that we create. And we create tools that we use. And sometimes they're bad tools, and sometimes they're damaging tools. But the point of what we're trying to return to is those life ground values that bring us back to what are the tools that will be sustaining us and benefiting us in the best way with as much knowledge as we have. And we would just be continually updating those. And to look at something that's man-made is just something that is also natural. Now, we can say there are all sorts of damaging, chemicals in our atmosphere that, we think of, but let's consider that those are just, if we could just label those as maybe just toxins or something that were created, instead of just, oh, well, they're man-made. To recognize that even in our language, we can have a negative association with, well, if man made it, it must not be good. Well, I'm very appreciative of a lot of the technology that I use. on a daily basis. I would not want to go back. I would rather go forward if I had a time machine. This concludes part 2 of our discussion. Special thanks to Gary Kent, Eva Omori, Brandon Christie, Jason Lord, Raul Matra. I'm Jen Wilding. Thanks for joining us on ZM Global Radio.